This is the Patriots Catch-22 podcast with Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
I'm Evan Lazar. Evan Lazar. Hello, everybody.
Nailed it. Joined as always by our Barth.
That's a fit. That's a match.
No risk it, no biscuit.
22.
Here is Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
15. That's like 2% of the entirety of the plays that they called, right? They called 1,000 offensive plays. I'm not very good at math, but I can tell you that's like 2%, right? 1.5%, whatever.
At this point, we should probably Microsoft Excel as a sponsor, given how often we talk about them. Although the way I talk about them, I don't know how well that would work. It's Alex Barth in the host chair today on Catch-22. A little bit of a shotgun start here. That's partially on me, but we are off and running on a Senior Bowl. Partially on me. We are off and running on a Senior Bowl edition of Catch-22. It wasn't Evan's fault. It wasn't Matt's fault. I'm just going to say it was partially my fault, but we are underway here. It's Alex Barth in the host chair because Evan Lazar is down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. That's going to be the heavy majority of the show today. Will be Senior Bowl topics. We'll get it. There are a couple more coaches that were hired the last couple days. Drake May's going to the Pro Bowl. We can get to that as well. Your calls, 855-PATS-500. But before we get underway, I let people know our show is brought to you by Toyota. Hey, Patriots fans, if you want to see Toyota's best offers, including those not seen on TV, go to buyatoyota.com. It's Toyota's official website for deals from the official vehicle of the New England Patriots. Toyota, let's go places. And Bud Light, easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the New England Patriots. So 2 days down in Mobile, 2 practices down, 1 to go tomorrow, and then the game on Saturday. So things hardly in the books yet. A lot of time for things to change, but I think let's start here, Evan, because the Patriots, you could argue, their biggest need on both sides of the ball is in the trenches. We kind of knew when you looked at the rosters going into this week. They always do a good job of putting together a complete roster, but this year specifically, It felt like the strength down there is in the trenches. And I think that just big picture, I'm curious if you agree seeing it in person, I think that's held up through 2 days on both sides of the ball. For the most part, there's a couple other players here and there, but for the most part, the best players at the Senior Bowl this year are offensive linemen and defensive linemen.
Yeah, I would definitely say that's true on the defensive side of the ball. The defensive line group, and I want to get into individual players here with you. We can just kind of go through both rosters, and I'll just start throwing names at you that have stood out to me here. But just watching this defensive line group for both teams, but especially the American team, there's been some dominant stretches of practice for this defensive line, and this is cutting off there's no Abdul Carter here, right? We're cutting off the top of the class and really starting to talk about, the kid from Texas A&M is probably the best or highest rated player. Yeah, or Green from Marshall, right? Like those are the 2 top guys here that are fringe first round picks. So we're not even talking about the top of the top. And it's been a dominant group. Your boy Deion Walker has some things to work out, but he's looked really good in terms of his size and his strength and all that translating. And there's a couple offensive linemen, though, that I would agree. That Zabel kid from North Dakota State is outstanding. He's fantastic. Some of the tackles, I think, have been up and down. We can get to that here in a minute. But overall, my big picture takeaway about the tackle group, I'm just curious about your thoughts. I think just getting the general feeling down here about it, it seems to me like there is some trepidation about this tackle group, especially at the top of the draft. And we've discussed this many times, like, is Will Campbell a tackle? Is he a guard? Is Kelvin Banks truly one of those types of guys? And then you were kind of hoping that Ursery and Connerly were going to take that next step this week of putting themselves into that like top 20, top 25 conversation. And I think it's been a little bit up and down for those two. So I'm not saying that there aren't any good tackles. In every draft, there's always going to be players. But in this draft, it definitely feels like the tackle sweet spot might be closer to the Patriots' second-round pick than their first-round pick. And now it just comes down to how do you divvy that up, right? How do you sort of figure that out from there?
We can start with the tackles. I think that's probably what a lot of people are interested in. I thought Ursery and Connerly specifically, I thought they were both pretty good yesterday. I thought yesterday you more or less saw what you wanted to see from them. Today, and they're both together on the national team, they did that thing yesterday in the national team coaching staff where they cross-trained everybody. And, the left tackle spent a lot of time on the right side. The right tackle spent a lot of time on the left side. We obviously saw that here with Alex Van Pelt last year. Now, it's a completely different setting. And I understand why they do it, because teams want to see these guys on both sides and figure out if these guys can be swing tackles. And some guys took advantage of that opportunity. I don't want to say everybody struggled, but there's obviously the clip going around of Josh Connerly getting blown up by Mike Green. Arianta Ursary struggled a little bit as well in that setting, but that's at right tackle. So, the big takeaway for me from today is Connerly and Ursary aren't right tackles, which, okay, it's fine. I don't think you're drafting them to play right tackle. I don't think anybody, it's good to see. And if you're, if you're an evaluator, you definitely want to see it, but I don't put, and maybe this comes off as just me defending players I like, but I don't put as much stock in a guy that has played left tackle his whole career, that I'm looking to draft as a left tackle, getting blown up on one rep at a right tackle at a showcase game.
Yeah, I would also mention, and not to take anything away from Mike Green, who I thought was dominant today, the rep that's going around of him bull rushing Connerly, it's a fantastic display of power. It doesn't do a whole lot for me, though, because if you watch the rep, Mike Green ends up on the ground, too.
Yeah,
so
good point.
You just kind of took yourself out of the play as much as anything as well. You showed off that you got some real human strength, which is great, but if you're playing that in a game and both guys go down in that scenario, if you're playing Drake May and he sees that the right tackle gets bench pressed back into the pocket, but the guy rushing on him falls to the ground, I know what Drake May's doing. He's going right outside the right, he's just going to run right outside the pocket in that direction. So you can stay on your feet. That's the one thing that always, balance and all that stuff is great. But I agree with you that both those guys showed much better at left tackle yesterday. Just starting with Connerly, I think the one thing that really stands out to me with him is that he's just got a really great urgency out of his stance, just really quick, explosive, choppy, I should say opposite of choppy, fluid movements, right out of his stance, can get to the set points, can get to his landmarks in the run game really effortlessly. He's the one thing that just eye test wise and just looking at him in person, he's not overly big. And I'm not talking about that he's Isaiah Wynn, right? He's not that small,
right?
But he's 6'4", 310, 315. He's got the length. He's got 34-inch arms. That's not the concern. But just in terms of, on the opposite side of the spectrum, Ursary is a mammoth, right? He's 6'6", 335, 340 pounds. So we're talking about two really, really different players. Connerly is more the athletic, dancing bear type. Whereas Ursary is, if you want a guy that's going to block downhill in the run game and move people and move bodies at the tackle position, then Ursary is your guy. That's the type of guy that's going to be able to do that. Connerly, I think, is a higher level ceiling in terms of pass protection just because of his movement skill. With Ursary, he's just a people mover. He's a monster of a man. It sticks out right away how big he is. Just tall, stocky, all the way through. Very, very powerful, but he does play high. He plays with higher pads and a wider hand carriage, too, that he's going to have to get inside of those edge rushers that are going to try to get underneath him and stuff like that. But both guys, I'm not writing off either guy. I think both guys have that potential. I just think, again, it comes back to where do you find that sweet spot to be able to target one of those players? Are you able to wait till 38? Are they going to fall to you? Do you have to trade up from 38 to land one of those players at the back end of the first round, let's say? Do they go into that Tyler Guyton type range, right? I think he went 25 or 26 last year. That's a big question with this tackle group because I don't think that there's a lot of depth to this tackle group either. There's two guys that have stood out here, and I'm sure you feel the same way. For a lot of people, Benton from NC State has been solid. He might, I don't know if he's going to be an inside guy or an outside guy at the NFL level. Might be a little bit of both. I haven't been overly drawn to the kid from Boston College. I should know names.
Ozzie Trapillo.
Yeah. I haven't been overly enamored by him. I think he plays pretty tall and doesn't have a whole lot of bend in the lowers to kind of get down and block guys that are going to be speed rushers off the edge against him. But he's got all the tools. He's got a good size to him, and he did pretty well in one-on-ones yesterday and today, especially today. So those two guys have popped in terms of like that. Now we're talking early day 3, mid day 3, that type of thing. I would say maybe late day 2 if they sneak in there. But it's an interesting group. When you take Milam out of it, he's going to play guard or center at the NFL level.
Yeah.
Zabel's going to play guard or center at the NFL level. Like those are two guys I think a lot of people were hot on. And I think Emory Jones might play guard at the next level too. So, to take all three of those guys out of day 2 in terms of what you look at tackles, and it thins out a little bit. I'll
just to go backtrack real quick. I mentioned there were some guys that I did have success on the cross trading day, and you just named both of them in Belton and Trapillo. And Belton in particular fascinates me because he's probably going to go late day 2, early day 3. So it's not, you're not using a top 50 pick on him. And I know I'm the guy that for 2 years has been so anti-moving tackles. So this is going to come as a little bit of a surprise to people. But
come on, you're flip-flopping.
Well, let me explain. On one hand, it's a fair critique. Let me explain. On one hand, I think going from left to right is easier than going from right to left. On the other hand, I think for this specific scenario, where are you going to get him, right? If you get a guy like Belton, end of the 3rd, top of the 4th, okay, and you bring him in and you instantly start training him on the right side and just kind of keep him, let him do enough at left that he's comfortable, but you start training him on the right side. Now you have a guy that's a developmental player that even if he's not ready to start the year, you still have Caden Wallace, right? And you basically have him and Caden Wallace competing for that right tackle spot. Well, he's also a guy that can give you a backup on the left side. And his ability to do both of those things, like best case scenario, he's better than Caden Wallace. He's your starting right tackle, and boom. Even if not, even if he's a little worse than that, well, now you have a pretty good swing tackle. Now you have a pretty good third guy who can give you depth in both spots, which, as much as we've talked about them needing starters at the tackle position, they also need backups. They might not have backups at either spot. So Belton, if he was going to go in the top 50, I would say no. I'd say it's too much for that value of the pick. But if you can get him at 104, well, that changes the math on it. And now suddenly a guy like that makes a lot more sense to me. So I was hoping one of the big things I was going to be looking for was if we saw Belton on the right side. The fact he's played inside at guard too, I thought he was maybe one of these guys that was too big to play guard. And I guess Mekhi Becton in Philly has kind of proven that maybe that's a myth. Yeah. That you can be too big to play guard, because that has to be the vision, right? When you move him inside, that's what you're looking to replicate. But I think, pound for pound, again, I think Connolly and Ursery have been fine. They've had their issues, but they're not issues that worry me particularly in terms of being a guy you're going to take at the end of the 1st or the beginning of the 2nd round. I'm not worried there. But I think pound for pound, Belton might be having the best week of any tackle down there. Zabel's been the best lineman, and I don't think it's close. Yeah. Zabel's been unbelievable. Yeah. But I think Belton's really, really helped himself out.
Yeah, and you mentioned backing up at tackle. I also would throw out there that, look, they could need to fill left guard also. I'm not saying that I am prioritizing left guard in this draft, but if you draft a guy like Belton, 4th round, let's say, he's there for you in the 4th round.
I think 104 is probably, if you're the Patriots, it's probably where you're taking him. Unless he has an awesome combine and now maybe he's in the conversation 77.
Yeah, if you take Belton at 104 in the 4th round, and best case scenario, he's a tackle, right? And you develop him at tackle, and maybe he plays right tackle in the Patriots system specifically with McDaniels. Worst case scenario, maybe he's a starting guard, right? In the league too. Yep. And I know the worst case scenario is that he's not in the league, right? Like I understand that. I'm just saying, let's say he pans out and it works out for him somewhere. Belton eventually could play guard too or tackle. So now you kind of have this player that can play both inside and outside for you. If Layden Robinson doesn't work out, if Cole Strange doesn't work out, if they're giving up on City So, we've been over this. Like they have multiple spots to fill on the offensive line. You can never have too many of those types of guys that can play, all over the offensive line. It just is really valuable. Now, the other guy that I want to mention, who I think has been awesome, even though he wasn't on really anybody's radar. So, like, props to Vincent here from Alabama A&M.
Is it Vincent or Vincent? I wanted to bring him up. I think he's been good.
It's spelled Vinson, so I'm going to go with Vincent. Right? Okay. I don't know. Well, we can look that up. But yeah, he's a really, really intense guy. And that's something that I think is always cool about being here and being able to see in between plays and like what happens and stuff like that. One of the cool things that you hear a lot of the scouts chatting about is just watch this guy's demeanor. Like watch his him after the play. And this guy is always going crazy. And he had yesterday, they do that showcase like thing at the end of each practice session where they put everybody at the 50-yard line and they do one-on-ones. It's wide receiver, DB, it's tight end, safety, it's pass rusher, offensive lineman doing, one-on-one pass blocking. And Vincent got a one-on-one against Shamar Stewart and absolutely walled him. Just completely shut him down. And he was amped up afterwards. And this is a HBCU prospect, small school guy.
Alabama,
right? Not somebody that is on a ton of radars, like on the consensus board that we use. He's considered a fringe draftable player.
I don't think he's in the PFF draft simulator. I was looking for that too. There are a couple guys that weren't in there.
Yeah, I think he's looked draftable to me. I'm not saying you're going to draft him in the first round, but he looked draftable to me.
Well, let me ask you this: what position? Because they moved him around quite a bit. You think he's a tackle?
Yeah, I think he's a tackle. I think best case, again, best case, worst case, probably a swing tackle in the league. But I think he's got enough athleticism to play left tackle. And he's built he's a really built out guy, a really athletic build to him as well. And like I said, just nasty, just a really physical guy.
Any guards that stood out to you just before we wrap it up on the line? You mentioned those showcases at the end. Clay Webb has had wins in those, I think, on back-to-back days now. The guard from Jacksonville State, he stood out to me. He's held his own really well. Obviously Zabel, but he's probably going to go higher than the Patriots should realistically take a guard. Any other interior guys, especially for the Patriots, that have stood out to you?
Yeah, well, just really quickly on Zabel, because I just have to gush about Zabel for a second. I mean, that guy is just fantastic. Just plays with great leverage and great power in his strikes, and just great balance to his body control as well. And we're talking about a player that played tackle in college and hasn't repped a ton in the interior. And I think he could play all three interior spots. Put him at guard, put him at center, wherever you want to play him. Not to pick on him, but I didn't think it was as smooth for Wyatt Milam, who moved inside here this week. And hasn't been really very consistent. Zabel, on the other hand, has been dominant at times, and it just moves extremely well off the ball in the run game and has held his own in pass pro. Like I said, despite the fact that he hasn't blocked a ton on the interior, where things are quicker, more powerful, things like that. So he's looked really spectacular. I think if it was me, if you're looking at a guy like Zabel, I would play him at left guard. I just think that's where you probably get the most bang for your buck.
Yeah.
Make him a Joe Tooney, right? Put him at left guard and have a really high level pass protector at left guard who played tackle in college, is moving inside, that whole thing, which is similar to what happened with Tooney. The other one I would mention was Jalen Rivers from Miami. I thought he's been really solid, especially yesterday. He's playing guard here. He looks really, really good. Strong guy, good lower center of gravity, can absorb power, can move a little bit. I think he's been really solid. I thought he was definitely a winner yesterday. Haven't looked at him much today since I was looking at some other players.
Yeah, he had a couple misses today. He had a couple misses today, but
okay, yeah, he was really solid yesterday. Membu, the Missouri guard / tackle, he didn't practice, so we didn't see him, which was disappointing. But overall, I look at this group and I come back to how do we kind of split this baby here? I mean, you need to target tackle and offensive line. Where do you want to target it is important. And we have to talk a little bit at some point. I know was not in Mobile, but about Travis Hunter, who I think is like, what do you think of Travis Hunter right now? If he's a corner, if he's a receiver, was a big topic and discussion here in Mobile. It's just kind of fun. Like, everybody has a little bit of a different take on it, just like you and I do, right? So it's an interesting one, but we can save that after we get through all the players that are here. But in terms of the offensive line, I thought Ursary and Connerly, just to sum it up, I thought both those guys did enough. Like, I wasn't, wow, now one of these guys going to be drafted in the top 10 or top 15. I didn't necessarily get there, but I thought that they were okay enough and they weren't complete liabilities that it was a problem. And I would probably say, in terms of the sleepers, like, Belton was probably the most impressive.
I still think Connerly or Ursary, and you mentioned Tyler Guyton earlier. Like, I think we're right back into that spot. That was the guy last year where it was, all right, trade up from 34 and get your tackle. And they obviously didn't do that. There's some reports out there that they tried, but they obviously didn't do that. I think we're going to be having that same conversation again. They're going to pick whoever, unless they take Campbell or Banks at the top of the board, right? If we're sitting there April 24th, 25th, and they take Travis Hunter, or they take Ted McMillan, they trade back to take Ted McMillan, right? Something like that. They take Mason Graham. We're going to kind of be sitting there. We're not going to be done for the night. We're not. And when I say we, I mean, I think you have to have an eye on, for people following the team, is there a move back up the board? Or are they going to try to squeeze a second pick in the first round? Because I think those tackles are probably worth it. Elsewhere on offense, wide receiver, I think this is where we're going to disagree a little bit on a couple of players. The player to watch coming in, especially for the Patriots, was Xavier Restrepo, who kind of profiles as that ideal Patriots slot. Not only does he have the quickness, but he has the toughness to be a volume guy. You see it, he's built for it. He's built a little thicker, a little more dense to absorb some of those hits. I think he's done what he needed to do so far through 2 practices. I don't have, there hasn't really been anything that stood out that you worry about from him. I know you were texting me that you maybe had some concerns about his long speed. In that position, I don't really worry so much about straight line speed. He's not going to be running in a straight line that much. And if he is, he's pulling away from defenders, which is great. I'm really high in what I've seen from Restrepo this week.
Yeah, I wanted to really fall in love with Restrepo, and I don't know if I necessarily got there with him. The thing that stands out to me, though, with him is the build. Like, yesterday, as soon as I saw him, I was like, all right, he's built like a running back and runs routes like a receiver, which is what you want if that's the role that you're going to play. If you're going to be a volume slot in that Julian Edelman, Khalil Shakir, like that type of role. And I see a little bit of Shakir in him. Shakir's a little bit taller, a little bit bigger. But in terms of Restrepo, I do see some comparisons there. And a big element of it is, you don't see a ton of after the catch in these practices. So if he plays in the game, maybe we'll see a little bit more of that. But like, you're watching these guys run routes. You're not necessarily watching what they can do with the ball in their hands. And I think that's a big part of Restrepo's game. He's returning punts this week. He's working out of the slot. He's doing all those types of things. So I definitely think that that's a big element to his game. He's a first and second level route runner, though. Like, there's not going to be a whole lot. He tried a couple of times this week to run the slot fade and take, get deep on a defender. And he just doesn't have a whole lot of pull away speed. And he's got really short stride length as well, because he's like 5'8", 5'9". I think he's 5'9". So that's a part of it too. So I don't think you're going to get much of a vertical element from him playing in the slot. But again, like we've been saying with him, if you want to move the chains, if you want to get that quick twitch guy on the inside that can create separation, I still think he can do that. I just see a lot of it coming at the first 2 levels, especially the first level of the defense, and maybe some of the like screens and scheme touch type of stuff as well.
And I'm not too worried about that, because we know they probably need more than one receiver. And can you go get the vertical guy elsewhere, right? Yeah. Or I for what he is, I still think he's a good player, but I know you're maybe a little more interested in Tez Johnson.
Well, Tez Johnson is a fascinating one, because you can just say it. Are we doing Tyquan again? Right? We're in a similar category.
Significantly shorter Tyquan Thornton.
Right, which is To me, that's part of it, though. Like Taekwon's issues were that he wasn't just underweight; he was also rail thin. Like he was a stretched out 180 pounds. If you get what I'm saying, like he was a tall, lean individual. Like that was his big thing, and so he was frail. Like he just didn't have the body to withstand the NFL in terms of staying healthy and also just the physicality of the NFL too, at least to this point.
Yeah.
So with Tez Johnson, I still have some of those concerns.
He's 156 pounds.
Yeah, he's tiny. He's 156 pounds. There's no doubt. But it's a little bit more, the way he carries it is a little bit more natural, if that makes sense, because he's not 6'1", 6'2", right? Like he's built a little bit more, like Tank Dell. Like that's the
Tank Dell's
comparison.
much bigger than he is. No, to me, the comparison is Devin Tompkins. And I know you're going to say Tutu Atwell, but...
Yeah, Tutu Atwell is like another one that came to mind. Is Tank Dell that much bigger? I mean, here, I'll look it up. I don't remember Tank Dell being that much bigger, but maybe I have it wrong. I mean, Tank Dell is 5'8", 165 at the combine. So he was 10 pounds heavier, I suppose, than Johnson.
Yeah.
So the way that he's run routes down here, though, it just reminds me of all of the. I wasn't at that Senior Bowl when Tank Dell came out, but I remember all the oohs and ahs about Tank Dell's route running, and we watched on TV and stuff like that. And he put on a show. And I don't know if Tez Johnson quite did the Tank Dell. Like Tank Dell had an incredible week in Mobile to his draft cycle, but he was really, really good today in team, in one-on-ones. He can't cover him. If you're not going to be able to be ultra physical, the safety is not going to come down and knock him, right? Like those are all things that you have to think about in practice. That doesn't necessarily translate to the game. But he's fast. He's quick on his feet. He's got all the separation ability in the world. He's just tiny. So I understand. If you're a Patriots fan and you're a hard no on a player like that because of what we've seen with Taekwon, I totally get it. I'm not going to necessarily argue with you, but just what has happened with what I've seen with my eyes over the last 2 days, there's no question that he's been the best separator in Mobile.
But
doubt.
it's more than just that to me, because he's going to be a top 100 pick. If you could get him later on day 3, I'd be more interested. But he's going to be a top 100 pick, so that's a guy you need a plan for immediately. What is his, assuming we think Josh McDaniels is going to run it, and we know we talked about this last week, there's going to be different wrinkles too with Drake May, but like the same core concepts, right? Same core offense. What's the role for Tez Johnson? It's not the slot, because he can't get 120 targets in a season. He's just not, physically, he's not going to be able to do that. He's not next. Probably, is he a Z? But if he's that kind of speed Z that, Chris Hogan, Danny Amendola role, we already have Pop Douglas. So you're either, to me, if you draft Tez Johnson, it's to move on from Pop Douglas, which when you have all these other needs, and Pop Douglas is one of your better players, using a top 100 pick to replace Pop Douglas doesn't move the needle for me. I think that's a redundant pick, and they need to be adding, not replacing, in the top 100.
It's a valid point. And I look at Tez Johnson as a receiver that I would say is a runway player. Like, you want to set him up on crossers, on go routes, on slot fades, anything that you can possibly do to get that guy in a foot race. Like that's exactly what you're going to try to do with him. You're going to move him around. You're going to put him in motion. You're going to put him in stacks and bunch alignments and things like that so he doesn't get pressed. And you're just going to get him off the line of scrimmage and let him run. Like that's just ultimately what he's going to be. He's shown a little bit more of, horizontal, lateral agility than I thought he had in that Tank Dell mold. But I hear you. Like, I definitely see some similarities in terms of usage with Pop. I think he's a little bit longer than Pop. Like, his catch radius is a little bit bigger. But he's a similar player overall. And if you're the Patriots, if you're worried about that type of redundancy. Now, I will say I do think that they're trying to get away from role-specific scouting. And, just looking at it as, this guy's a slot receiver. This guy's a third down back. That guy's a situational pass rusher. guy's a Mike linebacker. I do think they're trying to get to more of a best overall talent type of system in what they're grading. Elliot Wolf has talked about this on the record before, so I'm not breaking any news here. But that I do believe is what they're trying to do with this new grading system.
But there has to be a balance there. Otherwise, you end up with like 10 guards. There has to be a balance there, and especially if it's a guy in the top 100, like it's not just, we've talked about this, it's not just best player available. It's best player available for the football team, for your specific football team. And if you think Tez Johnson's a great player, and then you get to camp and you're putting the offense together, and suddenly you don't have any place to put him, how is that the best player available if you don't have a way to get him on the field? Or you're now taking Pop Douglas off the field, who's one of your better players. I just think that has to be considered.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It has to be considered. But my rebuttal to that, because I got a need for speed.
You just want a track team. You just want fast guys.
Any guy that can separate, I am on board with.
So here's what you do. You go to Oregon's track practice and just convince all those guys to enter the draft.
Oh, is that what they did with Tez Johnson? Because it's possible that Oregon just did that for me by putting Tez Johnson on their football team. But just the last thing I'd say about Tez Johnson, just as a rebuttal to your point, because I hear where you're coming from. I worry that, looking at last year's draft, for example, we've heard a little bit of this coming out with reports and things like that they passed on Ladd McConkey because they felt like he was a slot-only player and that they had that already with Pop Douglas, right? And I'm not saying that that's necessarily exactly what it was, but that there's been some reporting out there that was the mindset, that they thought that a guy like Jalen Polk could play a little bit more on the outside and be a little bit more versatile and all those types of things. I would just hate to see them miss out. And I'm not necessarily saying this is Tez Johnson, but maybe it's Luther Burden. Maybe it's, somebody else like in this mold as well. I would hate to see them miss out on that type of receiving talent simply just because they're sitting there saying, well, he's redundant to the guys.
Yeah, I think Luther Burden can do more. That's a different conversation. You're going to get a lot more out of Luther Burden than you are to Tez Johnson. I just think if I get the Ladd McConkey thing, but it shouldn't be Ladd McConkey or Jalen Polk. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It's Ladd McConkey or Jalen Polk or A.D. Mitchell or Tavondre Sweat or Brandon Coleman or like any of these other players that are available, right? You could look at it like, all right, so Ladd, I'm trying to remember exactly where the board was at that point. I think Tavondre Sweat was still on the board when they traded down, right? If I remember correctly. I know he went the pick before, but it was the pick before they actually took Polk, not the pick before they traded, right? So anyway, the point being, like, let's say it was, just for the sake of argument.
He went 38.
38.
So Polk was 37.
Okay, so they had a chance to take Sweat when they traded down. So Tavondre Sweat's a great player, and they needed a defensive tackle this year. Badly, they needed a player like that. So, it's not just, we don't think this wide receiver is a fit for us, so we're going to take a lesser wide receiver. If anything, it speaks more to the best player available thing. All right, we think this player's good, but this player in another position's also good. And whether or not you have a role for the guy should absolutely be a tiebreaker. So if they were to draft Tez Johnson, they're going to end up burying somebody, and they just don't have the roster where they can afford to bury guys. They need to spread the talent. I get it's like, yeah, we think this guy can do this. I'm more so approaching it from the it's not so much, okay, they already have a guy that can do this, so they shouldn't draft Tez Johnson. It's they have so many things other things that they need filled. That can we look at another position? Can we look at another skill set? Maybe it's an X receiver right in that spot that I think they need to consider. And
sure.
Any other wide receivers stand out to you?
Yeah, we can move on from our Tez Johnson debate that we'll probably have 50 more times. So I thought both Iowa State receivers were decent, Noel and Higgins. Both those guys I thought stood out for different reasons. Noel, I think, is smooth at the top of the route. Like, doesn't waste much movement, gets in and out of the breaks pretty cleanly. You can see that second level separation there from him there. And then Jaden Higgins, I thought, was really smooth for his size. Like he came in at 6'4". Like he's a tall, bigger receiver, 6'4", 210, 215 pounds. And he's really, really smooth for that size. We do this a lot, and I think it's applicable here. A couple years ago, it was like Zay Flowers, Josh Downs, Pop Douglas, right?
Right.
I would say Ted McMillan is like that. The what's the word?
Apex.
Like the high-end apex prospect for this type of body type and skill set. Jaden Higgins is like day 2 Ted McMillan, right? Like he's the guy that's got the size but has that size and runs routes like a smaller guy, but can use that size when called upon. Like he's not Mike Evans. Like he's not going to go in and moss people and stuff like that. It's not necessarily his game, but I do think he can use his length and his catch radius when needed. But he's more a route runner, in that Ted McMillan, Drake London type of mold.
Do you think part of the conversation around him this week was he's going to get typecast as a big slot in the NFL? Do you think he's kind of broken that?
He had a really good one-on-one rep today on the outside. Awesome release. If you want to be realistic about the type of player that he is and not get too crazy with the comps, Yoshivas on the Bengals is like one guy that kind of stood out to me as that type of player. And I think Yoshivas played a lot in the slot, but he also had Higgins and Jamar Chase, on the outside taking up reps there. So maybe that was just the situation. But those are the types of guys that I look at. For Jaden Higgins, I don't think that he's a pure slot only guy, but I can see why people think that would be advantageous matchups for him inside. Again, if you can get him on a slot corner who might be a little bit smaller, get him on a safety where he now can win that foot race versus trying to stack a corner on the outside. I could see those types of things being advantageous for him, but I don't think he is just a slot guy because of his size. Like I think he's got enough size to play on the perimeter, but you're probably talking about a piece you're trying to move around. But for all the reasons why people love Ted McMillan that call into our show all the time and talk about Ted, this is a Ted McMillan, but on day 2 of this draft. And I know a lot of people are sick of doing that, trying to shop at the dollar store or the discount store instead of just going out and buying the brand name. But I definitely could see Jaden Higgins playing a similar type of role in the NFL and doing it pretty well.
You can only take one player top of the draft. So if it's, you got to know who these guys are later. Because if it's not, day 2 Ted McMillan, then you're looking for day 2 Abdul Carter or day 2 Will Campbell or whatever, right? I'll give you one more receiver I like, and this is another guy I like for that volume slot role, although I think he does have some Z receiver potential, and that's Kyle Williams. I'll be honest, I was kind of late to him. I was doing some research before the game, and I was just looking at the roster, and I'm looking at all these guys, and I start looking at him, and I start watching him. I think I text you, I text some other people, and hyper productive with really bad quarterback play at Washington State. The thing that stands out to me is not just his ability to accelerate, not just his acceleration, his deceleration. He can go from full speed to a stop like that, and then he can go from a stop to full speed like that, and it makes him really dangerous at the top of the route and off the catch. So I'm looking at him and look, he's a little undersized, 5'10", 190. He played in that Pac-2, didn't have the strongest competition, but I'm like, this guy looks like a top 100 receiver, fringy top 100 receiver. And I go to our big board, and he's at 800. I think he's 830. Yeah. He was the last ranked receiver on the big board. And then I start looking around. A lot
of these things are going to change.
Right. Well, then I start trying to Google him and looking on Twitter, and nobody's talking about him. And I'm like, did I imagine this guy? And it got to the point where even during the broadcasts today, every time he was up for one-on-one, they cut away. They're gaslighting me into believing this guy exists. But from what I've seen, he's looked very good. I'm curious what you think, but I've been very impressed. You want to talk about a true sleeper. Again, they won't even show his one-on-ones on the broadcast. But, they cut back to it later. I see people in the media posting clips, and he looks pretty good.
Yeah, I wrote down his name a couple times today. I thought he had some good moments today. Didn't really see much of him yesterday. Didn't really flash a ton in the first day of practice, but I thought today definitely had some good moments. And I would say him and the other guy I was going to bring up to you too is Jack Beck from TCU.
Yeah, very different players, but he's been good.
Yeah, both those guys, though, I think did a nice job this week of finishing through some contact and being able to just kind of be strong and sturdy at the catch point.
Well, Beck is a total catch point monster. Like he's
Yeah,
dominant physically.
He is a
catch
monster.
Point. Yeah,
he's a big dude.
I was texting you this.
He
gives me some Jake Bobo vibes.
Yeah. I that's a good comp. With Kyle Williams too, though. I thought I saw some of that, and I think that's such an underrated skill in scouting receivers is being able to finish through contact.
Well, especially especially for a guy like just to separate him. Beck's like what 6'2", 210, 215. Like Williams is a much smaller receiver doing that.
Yeah, and I definitely think that there's some of that. Some of these guys get into the NFL level, and you can't finish the catch at the catch point because you're always going to see good coverage at the NFL level. It's not going to be like college where no one's within 5 yards of you at some points. Like there's always going to be somebody in your back pocket, and you're going to have to finish through contact. The other guy that I thought did that really well today was Arian Smith from Georgia, who looked like a Georgia player playing at a college showcase game today. I had those moments where it was like, all right, this is like a 4 or 5 star recruit out of high school, like that type of alpha athlete. Had a great catch down the field in one-on-ones in the end zone where he climbed the ladder and was able to go and get the ball. So those types of guys always stand out to me in these settings. Like I love the Tez Johnsons. I just talked about him for 5 minutes. But at the end of the day, at the NFL, you're going to have Christian Gonzalez in your back pocket in training camp. And the question is, can you finish the job when the ball is targeted, when you're throwing the football? And I thought I saw a little bit of that from those guys.
Tight ends. The big story, arguably I think one of the bigger stories of the week has been Elijah Arroyo. And for me coming in, I didn't really know what to expect from him. He had a good season at Miami, but there's a lot of attention played to Restrepo. Teams are doing, they're blitzing Cam Ward or spying Cam Ward and things like that. A lot of his production felt like, I don't want to say a byproduct of other people getting attention, but it was, all right, what does he look like when he is the guy? Like, he was the guy to me. We try not to use one-on-ones too much, but he's a guy that I think one-on-ones are big for. And he's been excellent. He's just been dominant. And he's a guy that's going to fly up draft boards, but for a team that, day 3 developmental tight end, if he stays on day 3, certainly feels like he checks that box.
Yeah, who he reminds me a little bit of is Jared Wiley last year from TCU. Just like an athletic pass-catching tight end. I'm not sure I see a ton of blocking upside there with him, but he's going to be able to run routes and he's going to be able to get open. With that body type is rare. He's got great straight line speed too. I mean, he's
fast.
He's fast. Yeah, all these analytic models that they're trying to pump up here at the Senior Bowl are all giving him really high marks. So he can really run. Some of the one-on-ones have definitely been stick nod, like double move type of routes and things like that, where he's shaking guys, but you see that ability, the change of direction skill there and the straight line speed to be a productive pass catching tight end potentially. I definitely think he's a move type of tight end. I don't think you're going to put the hand in the dirt and have him block very many defensive ends or outside linebackers at the next level. Yeah. But if you're looking for that developmental tight end with some athletic upside, with some receiving upside, Arroyo definitely fits that bill. I think there's been a lot of really good tight ends. The one guy that is hasn't really popped a ton is Fannin, though. I thought he would be a little bit better.
He looks more like a big slot receiver at this point.
Yeah, he hasn't done a ton. Like I think that with the entire national roster, the early practice for people watching it on TV, the receivers, both tight ends and wide receivers, the pass catchers, have just been a lot better on that team, I would say. They're just better on paper even. But I would, Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, I think is the guy that stood out as like the number 2 guy behind Arroyo in this tight end group here in Mobile. I don't think it's been Fannin, which I don't know. Maybe you just trust the tape on a guy like that. But when you go to Bowling Green, and then you come up here and you're playing against better competition. And Ferguson, I thought, has done a lot of really good things as well. And I think he can maybe block a little bit better than Arroyo can, but probably doesn't have the straight line speed and athleticism. But he's certainly a good athlete, and he's got a lot of those same skills. Big guy, good catch radius. finishes through contact, runs good routes, clean route runner. I like him too. I mean, it's a good class. It's a good class.
It is. I like Mason Taylor. I think he's been really good.
Yep.
If you want that just like blocking tight end, I've kind of looked at this too. Do they just go on day 3 and say, we want a third tight end? We can put in on the goal line, put in when we want to go heavy. And Jackson Hawes from Georgia Tech, he even got a call out today when they did those one-on-ones at the end. Like it was all offensive linemen. And then Jackson Hawes, and I think he lost the rep. But like just the fact that the edge rushers, because I think the players get to call each other out, right? Like you want to go against a lineman, you'd think, in order to set yourself up for the biggest pop, but want to go up against this guy. And I thought this was interesting. Here's what you thought of this. Somebody on the broadcast today, I don't remember who it was. Somebody on the broadcast was talking about Gavin Bartholomew from Pitt and called him a Jason Witten starter kit.
Okay, let's calm down.
Well, he said starter kit. He said starter kit.
Okay. Or does that mean like, what's that mean?
I assume that means like he has all the tools to be Jason Witten, but he needs to be coached up into it.
He has all the tools to be a Hall of Fame tight end. Got it. All right.
So you disagree? I thought it was a little strong. I was just curious.
It's a little strong. I think the 3 guys that we mentioned at that position have been the ones mostly that have popped for me at tight end. Ferguson, Arroyo, Mason Taylor, who I think has been solid from LSU.
Gunnar Helm
today. I haven't seen a ton of Gunnar Helm. I don't think he practiced.
Oh, he might not be. He might have opted out. I've been trying to keep track of the opt-outs.
Yeah. And the other Brenningstool from Clemson.
Jake Brenningstool,
moments today. I wouldn't say I'm like overly into it, but he
had
some
small
moments. I think
for a tight end.
Those 3 guys, Taylor, Arroyo, and Ferguson, have been the 3 best tight ends. But when you put that on top of the guys that were at the Shrine, obviously Tyler Warren, it's a really good class. It's a really good class.
All right, Evan, say something nice about one of the running backs, or more than one if you want.
I gotta admit, there's been 2 running backs, and you're gonna love this. There's been 2 running backs that I've liked.
Can I guess?
That I've been pretty. You can. I don't know if you'll get it right, but
I think one of them's got to be Donovan Edwards.
Yeah,
because of what he's done. There's people who are saying like draft him as a slot receiver, which I think is a little bit too far. But he's been really good. I would love for the other one to be Ollie Gordon, but it's not. I'm just gonna guess my favorite receiving back there, which is LaQuint Allen.
I know it's not, but that's a good shout. Like he's definitely had a decent week. It wasn't him. So Edwards is definitely one. Yeah. Devin Neal from Kansas is the other.
You like a 5'11", 225-pound running back? I would not have seen that coming.
Look at me. Look at the growth right now.
I'm impressed.
I am displaying.
I'm impressed.
Devin Neal had a run today where he had some space, but he was one-on-one with a linebacker, and he just went right up the sideline around the guy.
I know which one you're talking about. That was good.
Yeah, turned it into a really nice run, and I was like, all right, there's some juice there for a bigger, compact guy. That was what I liked about Edwards and about Neal the most, is that I think both those guys are built like NFL running backs, like guys that can withstand some volume, and be able to tote the rock a little bit and not have to worry about a ton of injuries. Like I think, Marks from USC has been solid as a pass catcher. Brashard Smith has had some moments from SMU. He's been okay. Marcus Yams from Delaware has had some moments. But those 2 guys, to me, Neal and Edwards, look like they are dudes that could really take it and be a volume-ish back, or at least be in a committee of running backs. And this group hasn't disappointed. I mean, it's a great running back class, and it hasn't disappointed. I think all of these guys have had their moments for the most part, but I really like Edwards. I think Edwards is a really nice player. Probably a complimentary back to, in a platoon or something like that. But, there's some really good running backs that have been here the last couple of years, and he's one of those guys.
Well, if they're going to go back to that early down, passing down back dynamic, right? I think you mentioned Woody Marks, LaQuint Allen. If we're going to do the whole next James White thing, those are guys that kind of profile that way. Donovan Edwards is like, hey, stick with me for this comparison. He's kind of like a souped-up Rex Burkhead, and what I mean by that is Rex Burkhead could go – he was one of the few guys that could go back and forth. He could play an early down role. He could be a receiving down role. And, if you're going to draft Donovan Edwards, I wouldn't he could bat so the way they have it set up now, right? Ramondre is probably going to be the early down back, and you figure Antonio Gibson's going to be your passing down back. And then if you were to draft Donovan Edwards, he can be the backup for both. Whereas if not, you need to get a backup for each spot. So I like Edwards in that role, but I'm looking at some of the early down guys too. I still can't quit Ollie Gordon, Evan. He was just so good in 2023, and I think there were forces outside of his control that led to the dip he had this season. He looks like an edge rusher. He looks like he should be lining up and rushing off the edge. He's massive. And we know Mike Vrabel now he's not Derrick Henry. He's not 260 pounds with all the muscle, but we know Mike Vrabel has experience with kind of those oversized running backs. And I think somebody's going to get a steal because Ollie Gordon with this class is going to fall to day 3, and somebody's going to get an absolute steal with him and, him platooning with Ramondre Stevenson in that early down role. I think would be electric. Before we wrap up the offense, unless you have any other thoughts on the running backs.
No, I think I've done enough on running backs.
All right, well, now we're gonna do the one you really want to talk about, which is the quarterbacks. One big quarterback takeaway for me, and I said going in for Patriots fans, what you're watching at quarterback is, does anybody have that rise? Does anybody have that push up the board? Will Howard didn't end up going, which I get. So, is it Jalen Milroe? Is it Jackson Dart? Was somebody going to push their way up the board, maybe into the top 10, change the value of that 4th overall pick? No, that has not happened to this point. It has been a rough couple days for the quarterbacks. Although my guy El Guerzma is hanging in there. He's made a couple throws. So,
this quarterback group. I'm sorry, I don't like to say this about players because I try to be nicer. But this quarterback group's been awful.
It's been rough.
It's been awful. And some of it, I get it. I didn't think that Michael Penix or Bo Nix was awesome down here last year either, because you never worked with these receivers. You're in these abbreviated offenses that you're learning on the fly. The timing, the rhythm of the passing game there's no way it's going to be there. There's just no way. But that being said, Joe Milton was better last year down here. And I don't say that as a knock on our boy Joe Milton. I'm just saying that he would have been the best quarterback in Mobile this year based off his practice performance last year, right? If that makes any sense. It's just been really, really rough for the entire, I can't really think of one notable throw. I think Riley Leonard's probably been the best, which is not saying much.
Elgers had a nice throw yesterday.
Okay, your boy, your
give me one thing. Give me one thing, because I'm not there. I can't watch everything. Give me one thing on him.
He made a really nice throw, rolling right on the sideline that you texted me about when it happened because you were so excited, and that was a really nice throw.
Because I know you're not watching him, so I had to make sure you noticed it.
Jalen Milroe throws a really nice ball. He can really rip it, but doesn't know where it's going. And it's not, he can rip it, but he's not Joe Milton rip it, right? It's not a bazooka. It's a good arm, though. He's got plus arm talent. There's no doubt about that. And when he has no pass rush and he's just throwing one-on-ones, Jackson Dart's the best passer. If you took away the pass rush and you took away the part that he has to read the field and go through progressions and all that kind of stuff, and you just have him throw go balls one-on-one, then Jackson Dart can sling it, right? He can twirl it, but he's got no all the other elements of the game are lost on him.
And that's all the Ole Miss offense is. Just go balls.
Yeah.
Just one-on-one go balls. So as these guys get ready for their NFL shot, I will ask you out there listening, are you getting ready for the big game? Create your own winning watch party with fan favorite finds from Bob's Discount Furniture. Bob's got everything from reclining sofas with charging ports so your phone never dies when you're checking stats, bar carts perfect for celebratory drinks, stylish servers for all your halftime snacks, and must-have media centers so you'll never miss a play. So stop in or visit mybobs.com to score major style points with Bob's Discount Furniture, the official furniture store of the New England Patriots. Also, easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the New England Patriots. Let's, because these guys...
I'm going to have our listeners grade our read skills.
You don't want that answer. I've seen it in the comments. You don't want that answer.
I want to know.
Unless you want to be done with the responsibility of it. You don't want that answer. In the chat, who's better at the ad reads? Before we get to the defense, Patty and Sean have been hanging on for a while. I got to remember how to take these calls. It's the one all the way on the left, right, Matt? I don't want to hang up on these people. They've been on long enough.
Button that says air.
Air. Okay, so I'm
The button that says air.
I can't read that from here. The text is tiny. I'm even wearing my glasses on the show. So maybe I'm better at the ad reads, but Evan's better at answering the phones. That's undoubtable. Patty and Agawam. What's up, Patty?
What's up, guys? How you doing?
Good.
Hey, Evan. Alex told you months ago to take a look at Ariante Ursary, and now you're getting a front row seat. You know.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. He's one of the guys that intrigues me. But you guys kind of hit what I wanted to ask you guys about, which is we're obviously not going to get one of the top 2 tight ends off the board. But I wanted to, you went over Elijah Arroyo, but also I wanted to ask you about Mason Taylor, what you thought of him, and do you think he would be a good fit here? And I had another question, but damn it, I can't remember it. But that's it. I'll take it off air, guys.
We'll get it next week. Thanks for the call, Patty. Evan, anything more on Mason Taylor? We did kind of just glide by him. He's looking like a top 100 pick, so that still may be a little high for the Patriots at tight end. But if they really like him, it can make some sense, especially if Austin Hooper leaves in free agency. Suddenly that pick makes a lot more sense. Mason Taylor at maybe like 77. Your thoughts on him? Also, just seeing Jason Taylor there talking about him made me feel old, and I hated that.
Oh, God, I didn't even put that connection together.
It's Jason Taylor's son.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Okay.
I know. That hurts, right? That hurts.
That makes me a little bit queasy. He had a really good day today. Catches everything. Really, really good, tough guy over the middle. Can separate a little bit. Kind of is a little bit he's cheeky about it, right? Like he pushes off, but he doesn't push off. He kind of uses his body to box out and make that little bit of separation at the top of the route without getting penalized for it. And there are refs here throwing flags. So
they're throwing those flags all right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there are lots of flags. I like what I saw out of him. I would like to see if he plays. I'm assuming he will play in the game. Maybe I can really watch that more closely on the tape and see his blocking. But in terms of the receiving, there's something there. I think there's some upside, and it makes sense. His dad was a really athletic guy. That he's a pretty athletic pass catcher. So I don't know. When you look at this class, it can go one of two ways. Same with the running backs. Like either there's like an insane run in the top 100 on all these tight ends, and they all get drafted high, or the depth of the class pushes some guys down. I guess it depends on which way it goes.
Sean in Vancouver's been hanging on. Sean, what's going on?
Hey, guys.
Hey.
I want to talk about the coaching. I've been looking at some of the coaching and listening to some people talk about how some of the offensive coaches have a bit of a West Coast background, and I'm wondering about the schemes. I'm wondering if Josh McDaniels will stick to more of the gap downhill run schemes with Marius well with play action, or is he going to mix in more of the zone blocking that we've seen the past couple of years, which I think was kind of a miss on a scheme fit. Like I don't think the players really were able to execute that as well. So I'll leave you for that answer.
Thanks, Sean. Evan, what do you think on that? And also just your reaction to any of the recent coaching hires or guys that are reported moving on?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think where I come at it with this West Coast thing is I feel like the West Coast offense, you have to talk about the two branches. And we've talked a little bit about this on the show already, but you have like the Shanahan tree, right? Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur. You have that side of the branch, which is under center, outside zone, moving pockets, bootlegs, shots down the field off play action, like that side of it. That dresses that all up with motion and all that kind of stuff. And there's the other side of it, which is more like the Andy Reid, Doug Peterson, Frank Reich version of the West Coast offense. That really is more of like a spread offense. Like it's, right. I think Lombardi likes to call it West Coast college, right? Like it's a West Coast boot roots. Mike Holmgren, like all this goes back to Bill Walsh. Like it's that side of it, but it's got a lot of spread elements where the quarterback is in shotgun and they're running gun run and they're running RPO and they're running motion off that and all that kind of stuff. So a guy like Thomas Brown, who's just reportedly right now a Patriots hire, not official, but a guy like Thomas Brown has done both. He was obviously with the Rams for a little while with Sean McVay, worked a couple different positions there, was the assistant head coach at one point for the Rams. But he's also worked with Frank Reich in Carolina and has done that side of the tree as well. So are they bringing in a guy like Thomas Brown, who's supposedly going to have the pass game coordinator title? Are they bringing in that guy to Shanahan the offense, or are they bringing that guy into Andy Reid the offense? Right? And that's going to be the big question. My guess, just based off of Drake May, is that they're bringing him in to Andy Reid the offense, and they want to build something that looks a little bit more like what we see in Kansas City, what we see in Philadelphia, with the quarterback in the shotgun and a lot of that early down option stuff that those teams do. I don't know if you people noticed, but in the AFC Championship game last week, the entire opening script from Kansas City was RPO. Right down the field.
I think it was 9 of the first 12 plays, something like that.
Yeah, just RPO'd them to death. Zone team, and you expect in Buffalo you're going to play a lot of zone coverages, and let's just mess with the linebackers, right? And play with their eyes. That was their entire plan to open the AFC Championship game. So that's where I would go. I hope was where they're going to go because Drake. Drake May to me is at his best as a gun quarterback. So I don't necessarily want to live with him under center like McDaniels has done in the past, or like that side of the tree does. But I think we're too quick, and I'm not saying Sean, but just in general, I think we're too quick right now to label all West Coast as Shanahan. Right, all of it is outside zone, under center, bootlegs, things like that. When there's this whole other branch of the West Coast with Andy Reid and with Doug Peterson and Frank Reich. So that's what I'm hoping for. But we'll see. We'll see what they end up doing. I talked to Vrabel yesterday. I had the pieces up on Patriots.com if you want to read it, and he hammered that this is not going to be the Tom Brady offense. There's going to be differences. There's going to be, I think he called them, new innovations to this scheme. And one of the things that really encouraged me about that interview and about what he said about McDaniels is that he went into the interview process and they discussed all these things in depth about, okay, this is what he called it your history, right? This is what you've done in the past schematically. This is where we want to go. And, how are you going to get us there? And he point blank said, this quarterback is different from other quarterbacks that they've had here. This is not Mac Jones, right? This is a different type of quarterback, and they want to do different things with Drake May than maybe what Josh McDaniels did with Brady or Mac or Derek Carr or whatever. So I'm encouraged by a lot of things that Vrabel had to say about Josh. I think their head is in the right place in terms of trying to change this offense and update it a little bit.
And I think just to the caller's point, specifically when you talk about, how's that going to work with gap run, zone run, like Thomas Brown, the report is pass game coordinator, right? So maybe more of that stuff's in the pass game than in the run game. And obviously it's got to be married together. You can't be running gap run and then all your play actions built off zone. But, maybe the idea is to kind of try to blend those two things together. Whatever they call you on, be confident about it. Confidence is also important to have when you're on the road with Bridgestone tires on your car, truck, SUV, or minivan. You're riding on tires you can trust. Bridgestone tires are engineered to give you peace of mind so you can focus on enjoying the journey. So whether you're on your morning commute, a cross-country road trip, or relaxing Sunday drive, Bridgestone tires will be with you wherever life's roads may lead. Bridgestone, solutions for your journey, available now at Sullivan Tire. All right, let's get back to the Senior Bowl defense. Let's just start up front because there's been a lot of overlap. Defensive tackles, defensive ends, outside linebackers. Who from that group has wowed you the most?
Who hasn't?
That's a good answer. That's a good answer.
This is what a group. What a fun group to watch. I just think that there's across the board. This group has just been outstanding. If we just start with the interior defensive line, Peebles from Virginia Tech, Darius Alexander, your boy Deion Walker. I think all those guys have been good. Cam Jackson from Florida had a nice day today. Walter Nolan got hurt, I think, during practice today, so he didn't practice, but it was decent yesterday. If you want to look at interior guys, and one of the things that fascinates me about how we move forward here, I wrote a little bit about this earlier in the week before I came down here about the 4-3 defense and the Patriots being a little bit more one gap, single gap up the field, trying to make more plays behind the line of scrimmage and be more aggressive. I think this group had, even though Deion Walker is certainly the opposite, like this group had a lot of those types of guys. If you wanted that type of player, I think that Alexander, Peebles, Walter Nolan, I think all three of those guys fit that mold of like, let's shoot gaps, let's get up the field, let's make plays behind the line of scrimmage, and all three of those guys looked really good.
Yeah, I think that interior group especially. I'll just say on Walker, because I spent a lot of time last week hyping him up. I think you've more or less gotten the full picture with him, and you see why he's so hyped, but why he's not a first-round pick and why those concerns are there. He has all the physical tools in the world, but using them correctly, using them consistently, like he still gets beat at times by players you really don't expect him to get beat by. The guy that's really impressed me, if we're going to do, again, the draft years thing, Mason Graham is your first round, this aggressive, penetrating interior lineman. Deion Walker's the day 2 guy. Cam Jackson from Florida is probably the day 3 guy in that regard. 6'6", I think came in at 353, if I remember correctly, and he's been awesome. He's been great, and his explosiveness and quickness, his ability to win initially, and then quick movements with his hands and feet to turn what might be an early edge into a full-on dominant win, really stands out for a guy his size. He's not just out there bullying people. He can do it. We've seen him do it. It's in his bag, but his toolbox, at least from what I've seen this week, is a lot more developed than what I was expecting from him.
Yeah, Deion Walker, plays a little high, like his pads definitely get up, and I know that's been a criticism for him across the board, and you can see that, and that probably saps some of his power that should be there at his size, that isn't always there consistently. But he had a run in team drills today where like 3-4 plays in a row, he was just wrecking stuff, like he was just in the backfield and making things happen. And he's so strong in his upper body that when he gets extended and he starts walking guards and centers back into the line, back into the pocket, it's over, right? You're on the tracks, like it's done. I thought Cam Jackson was really good today too, in a similar mold. But all these guys on the interior, I think, have had their moments for the most part. Just looking at the group, it's a really impressive. And I thought, especially during American practice, there was not a lot of. There wasn't really a pocket, and there was not a lot of running room on the interior for the American offense against the American defense. So I'm interested to see, because I think the national offense has better offensive linemen than the American group does. So in the game on Saturday, I'm interested to see if that carries over. If Connerly plays, if Ursary plays, if Belton plays on the national side, Zabel, do they still control the line of scrimmage like they did in practice? Because the American group just dominated the defensive line.
How about the stand-up guys? I know Ezaraku is somebody people around here like. Princely Umanalimian, maybe. I'm going to work on that. I'll have that down by the combine. He's been unreal to watch because he's so big and so physically dominating. All the Ole Miss guys have been pretty good on the edge, I'd say, as well. Anybody from that group?
So Mike Green was the best player on the field today, I thought, for either team, really. He was great from Marshall. Fringe first-round guy, probably, if this is sort of it, if this is his last sort of pitch to NFL teams until the combine, I think he's probably a first-round pick. I think he's kind of locked that up this week. Just been fantastic. I personally, I like what I've seen from Ezaraku from Boston College. Like, I think there's something there. I know, we kind of get, he went to BC, right. That's interesting. But the guy that's really stood out to me is Josiah Stewart from Michigan. the way that he plays, the first step quickness, the way he gets off the line, and we're always with these Michigan guys, they're always really good hand fighters, and they're really well versed in their pass rush repertoire already because they basically run a pro system down there in Michigan. So, all these guys that from Michigan tend to come into the league really polished with their technique as pass rushers and have multiple moves. And I think that Josiah Stewart is another one of those guys that has that. And I just looked it up quickly yesterday. It's not a perfect size measurables kind of comparison, but the knock on him is length. Like he's not overly tall or overly long, but he does have some of the same measurements as like a Harold Landry, if you want to come up with like a Vrabel comp, right? So that's a guy that I think could be on their radar.
Well, I was going to say,
run this type of system.
Is the Joshua Uche comp lazy? Because he played that same role in Michigan's defense.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily lazy. I think there's some of the same concerns in terms of his run defense, and this week is definitely really heavy on rushing the passer versus stopping the run in these practices. So you don't see a ton of that. I think you can see that because he doesn't have the length, right? So he's not going to be able to set the edge and do all that kind of stuff. That's what they're still looking for, and he's not their guy. Like if they're still looking for Anthony Jennings types, like that type of mold, he's not for them. But if you're looking for somebody to rush the passer, I think he is for you. He hasn't been consistent, but Femi Oladapo, I'm going to say that's how you say it, from UCLA. The one thing that talking to Cowden and especially this week for the piece, he mentioned effort and finish were like the two big sort of cliche type things that they look for, right? We're not talking skill sets and all the details and right now, just effort and finish. Those two things were really big for them. And that guy's been motor hot the entire week, right? Like you just see that type of ability. It's not always been consistent. He's been stymied a few times, but I think that he's been really a high effort, high motor, intense competitor type. And then the kid from Texas has been good too. Sorrell, Baron Sorrell. Yeah. I think he's similar. He had that Emory Jones showdown at the end of practice today, which was cool. They went
talk about effort and finish.
Yeah, they went 3 straight reps in a row because they went the first rep and it was a stalemate. Like Sorrell beat him initially, and then Emory Jones actually recovered really well. Then it seemed like they went a second rep. That I think Emory Jones won. I think Sorrell said, "I want another one."
Right.
They wanted a tie.
They ended up doing a best of 3.
Yeah, they went again, and I think Emory Jones beat him. But Sorrell was good for another one of those like in the Uche type of mold, right? Like a little bit more undersized, a little bit of a screamer off the edge. But Shamir Stewart, that guy's a dude. He's going to be a first round pick, I would assume. Kyle Kennard has been okay in moments. He's flashed in moments. Just a great group, just a deep group of edge rushers, throughout this draft as everybody anticipated. And I think it's lived up to the bill.
Do you see Kennard as one of those Patriots-like fits?
I do. And it's an interesting spot, right? Like if they don't go edge in round 1, if it's not Abdul Carter in the first round, is Kennard in play at 38? I would say he probably is. In play at 38. He's a twitched up guy. Like he's gonna, again, it comes down to if they're going away from this Belichick stuff of, 2 gap and hold the point of attack and set the edge and be disciplined and stay in your rush lanes and all. If they're going to allow guys to kind of color outside the lines a little bit more to try to make more plays, then I think Kennard fits. I don't think he fits if they're going to run sort of the old style of defense.
Well, if they are going to go to that more aggressive defense, they need to get smaller and more athletic. I shouldn't say smaller. They need to get quicker and more athletic at linebacker. So that's I don't know that linebacker is one of the stronger positions at the Senior Bowl overall, but I will say if you're a team that's looking for that kind of 3-down coverage, east to west linebacker, that seems to be who most of these guys are. Coming into the week, I like Demetrius Knight, another South Carolina guy. I think a guy that he's big for a guy that can move. He moves at 247, so you kind of get the best of both worlds. Nick Martin from Oklahoma State, a guy that missed a lot of time last year due to injury. I feel like we haven't seen a lot of the off-ball linebackers because they're not really doing the rush drills, but we haven't seen them a ton in one-on-ones. And, again, there's not a ton of run defense. It's really just the team stuff. Who stood out to you from linebacker?
Yeah, Knight's a good one. Shamar James from Florida and Eugene Asante, those two guys.
By the way, Eugene Asante is such a, like, he should be playing safety if he comes here. Or defensive back if he comes here, right? Eugene Asante.
Yeah. Both those guys have stood out a little bit just because of their versatility. Like, I've seen them do a lot in terms of coverage and, play off the ball against the run. What's Jack Kaiser's deal from Notre Dame? He was another guy that I thought really played the run very, very well. Like, not the most athletic, but very, very good in terms of, like, reading his keys and playing laterally to the line of scrimmage and kind of mirroring guys and squaring running backs up and things like that. I thought it was interesting, him and RJ Oben, who had some moments too, the Notre Dame edge rusher, like both those guys still coming here, I thought was interesting. I know Riley Leonard's here too, but he's a quarterback and he's wearing the red jersey and all that stuff. But both those guys just played in the national championship game like a week ago, 9 days ago, and they're here. Right. So that tells me something like that. Those are contact positions. They're coming here to hit people. They're coming here to be physical and to do all those types of things. A lot of those guys dropped out. The Ohio State guys, the Notre Dame guys, Penn State guys, like a lot of those guys dropped out and I'm not holding it against them. But I do kind of think it's cool that some of them did show up. Oben and Kaiser were two guys that fit that. If you're just looking for, and I don't know if they're necessarily these guys through and through, but if you're looking for guys, effort, finish, just football players, right? Like that tells you something that they still came, even though they were just playing a game 9 days ago.
Anybody else up front?
No, I think we named all the guys that stood out.
Did you say Tim Smith earlier? I thought he had a good day today from Alabama.
Today.
Yeah.
Yep. Had a good day today. Made some plays in the run game today. I thought we're pretty good. Him and Cam Jackson kind of tandemed a couple of periods today. Deion Walker had that one flurry of plays, and I think he shut it down a little bit and was like, "Yep, all right, I did my thing. I'm good." Those two guys had a good day today.
At corner. The guy I've been really interested in all week, he had a really good day yesterday. He was okay today, took a little bit of a step back, but I still thought he was solid, is Bilal Cohn from Western Michigan. Now, last year we saw a Matt corner come to this event and have a great week, and it was Quinion Mitchell, and he obviously tore it up now. I don't think Bilal Cohn's Quinion Mitchell. He's probably going to be a day 3 pick, but for what the Patriots need a corner, like you're looking for somebody to play opposite Christian Gonzalez, ideally somebody with some size because they have a really small room. Cohen is his experience in man and zone. He can play physically, and I think he's done a good job for the most part sticking with these power 4 receivers, which is kind of what you want to see from him this week.
Yeah, it's funny because last year was my first Senior Bowl being here, and Quinion Mitchell just was far and away the best player here last year, and then he goes and he gets drafted in the first round and has like a defensive rookie of the year type season for the Eagles, right? So, that's always stands out about those types of guys. So you just mentioning that. I thought Cohen was good, and I thought Quincy Riley from Louisville was really good today. I think those two guys, if you're looking exactly for what you described. And then I also have really been impressed by Mac McWilliams from UCF. Like, I think those 3 guys have covered really well. They're still going to be man-to-man, press man, sticky guys on the outside. I think all 3 of those guys have really competed. McWilliams had an awesome rep yesterday in one-on-ones and basically ran the route for the receiver and picked it off. Had another good rep today. He's a feisty guy. He lets you know about it, right? Like he beats you and then he tells you about it afterwards. I always like those types of guys at corner, especially opposite, not, obviously Christian Gonzalez, second team All-Pro, fantastic player. But opposite a guy like Gonzalez, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to have a little bark on the other side, right? Have somebody that's in people's ears. But I thought all 3 of those guys, and Thomas from Florida State didn't do as well today, but I thought he was okay yesterday.
So I was going to ask you about the guys. So those are more depth guys that we just named. The top corners are Maxwell Harrison from Kentucky, Azari Thomas from Florida State, Darian Porter. I love like the super long corners, right? Darian Porter from Iowa State. We're just going to do Juju Brents all over again, who I really liked that year. Any of those guys, like the top of the draft guys, stand out as, if the Patriots really want to get aggressive and build that cornerback tandem, not obviously at 4, it's Will Johnson and guys that aren't here, but, at 38, a guy like Maxwell Harrison or Azari Thomas. I know Trey Amos got hurt today, but he would also kind of be in that group. If any of those guys think maybe justify the Patriots going up and really getting aggressive at corner.
I thought Azari Thomas had a really good first day. I wrote about him yesterday in my recap of the day. I thought he was really good yesterday. Wasn't as great today, but you can definitely see cover skills there and the ability to play man-to-man. And Maxwell Harrison had like a couple of flashes, right? I don't know if it was necessarily super consistent, but he had a couple coverage reps where you're just like, all right, well, that guy was going nowhere, right? Just strapped him. So they both have some coverage ability. There's no doubt about that. But I would say, I'm telling you, I liked McWilliams.
All right.
I don't know. There's just something about the attitude that I like. I like guys that come here and compete. I think there are a lot of guys that come here and it's about the interviews, it's about the exposure, it's about all those elements. And there's other guys that come in here to prove a point, right? That come in here to make some money. And right. I thought McWilliams did that.
He's been good. He's been really. He's a little on the smaller side, right? Is he a slot corner or is he a boundary corner?
I think he's got the length, if I remember correctly. I looked this up yesterday. I think he's got the length to play on the outside, but he's not super big. No. 5'10", 180.
Yeah.
On the smaller side, certainly. So, we'll see. I'm trying to think that
I'm not anti him. I would just it's not like, oh, he's too small, take him off the board. They need multiple corners, but I do want to see them add size at that position.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's because of the jawing that made me think of Jack Jones. But
okay,
he's got a little bit of Jack. Jack Jones is a lighter guy. Like Jack Jones is not a super big corner. You're just looking it up. He's 5'10", 170 at the combine. Jack Jones was, and Mac McWilliams is 5'10", 180. So
I'll take like the 5'8" guys on the boundary having to cover like T. Higgins and Devontae Adams. It's more just like getting away from that, but. If you want the big guy, then Bilal Cohen has been the best. He's been the best in my opinion. I also think there might be some guys in the safety room that can help them out. So as we transition to safeties, I really want to see Andrew Makuba because I've been on this campaign that they need to get another true free safety in here to replace Devin McCourty, allow Kyle Duggar, allow Jabril Peppers to play in the box, do what they do best. And it's the rotation and solving that problem by playing guys out of position, I think, has been proven to not work, at least with the personnel they've had. They could maybe try again with another strong safety, but at this point, just go get a guy. And there's not a lot of these guys in the draft because of the way colleges play. I think Makuba can be a true free safety. Maybe he's not a guy you're going to put single high 70-80% of the time the way you did with Devin McCourty, but he can do it enough that I think he'd give that to you. Now, he's not there. So I go down to like the next level guy that can maybe do that. And Billy Bowman from Oklahoma is an interesting player because he's kind of a tweener, but he's not a tweener. They have a lot of tweener box safety, free safeties. He's more of a tweener free safety slot corner. And they need that depth behind Marcus Jones, especially if Jonathan Jones doesn't come back. He's a pending free agent. So getting a guy like Billy Bowman on day 3 who can give you some true back-end reps and also give you depth in the slot. He's another guy, too, to your point, that I think has shown up and competed. You've seen the effort. You've seen the compete level with him. He had a really nice pass breakup the other day on like I think it was a deep flag, where he initially got beat and just showed unbelievable recovery. So I've really liked him. I don't know how many other safeties have stood out to me, but I think Bowman's been really good and definitely a guy that should be on the Patriots' radar.
Yeah, he's been good, and I think you see him a little bit in that post safety role too, being able to help over the top in terms of leverage, right? Like a lot of these guys are using him as a leverage defender to play on the outside and take away the go routes and the quarters and things like that because they know they have post safety help, and he's been there a couple times that I've seen. Obviously, these passing games are not attacking the deep part of the field a ton because there's no rhythm to it, and the quarterback stinks, so that's a big part of it. But I thought Billy Bowman's been pretty good, and I think Dante Trader from Maryland has been probably the best of like the Patriot box safety types, right? If you're looking for in this group at least, for that type of player, not as big, he's not as built as like a Kyle Duggar or Marte Mapu or someone like that. He's only 5'11", 200 pounds, but he's really covered tight ends very, very well all week. And with safety, the Titans obviously had Kevin Byard for a very long time. He was sort of a Devin McCourty for them playing post safety, but they also drafted I've always loved him as a player, Monty Hooker, like that type of guy that is like what you're talking about with Bowman, right? He can play slot, he can play safety, and I do wonder if that role evolves to more of that type of player, like an Amani Hooker, who's kind of someone that can do a little bit of both and play that way. And I like Bowman for that role.
So they haven't shown. Again, I'm back here in Boston, so I'm at the mercy of the TV broadcast. They haven't shown really any special teams. They did show a little bit of punting today.
I wonder why.
Jeremy Crenshaw was good. The Patriots don't need a punter. I don't know if either of these kickers are Patriots fits, if they're going to stick to kind of what they've done in the past of wanting guys from, inclement weather environments. Ryan Fitzgerald's from Florida State. Caden Davis was at Texas A&M, transferred to Ole Miss. But if anything, you're not going to have anything on the kickers for me, are you?
So, I shouldn't say the name because I'm not 100. I can't remember 100% which kicker shanked one yesterday pretty badly. One of these two guys.
Gold helmet or blue helmet?
I think it was a gold helmet, I'm going to say.
All right.
So but Crenshaw's punted the crap out of them all.
Yeah, he looked good.
If you want to get into punters and kickers, he has certainly looked the part.
I'd love to, but at the end of the day, they have a good punter. They have Bryce Behringer.
Is he a good punter?
I think so.
Yeah, he's fine.
He had like a little dip in the middle of the season, but no, he was good this year.
Crenshaw definitely had some oohs and ahs at times. Had some of that going on, which I thought was interesting. So
I tried to get the stopwatch out, but the angle they were showing it from, I couldn't do it. Anybody else that we didn't get to?
No, I think that was pretty thorough. I think that was pretty much the group. I think that a lot of these guys, though, were as advertised, which is what you wanted to see. I don't think that you want to come into a week like this and have somebody come completely out of left field on you, and then you're going to change your entire opinion on a player or a class or a position group just because of what they did here. That you're trying to look at more confirming priors. I think the one guy that, because I admit I came in and I tried, Alex. I tried to not do Taekwon again. Like I tried to throw out that type of that archetype. I tried to toss it.
So then don't. It's not that hard. Then don't.
Not this time, Evan. You're not falling for this trap.
But you are.
With Tez Johnson, that was the only thing that happened.
All right. I guess I'll just...
if he literally was like, you could not cover him. Like if he was just okay, I promise you I wouldn't be doing this, right? Like if he was just okay, but he wasn't just okay. He was great. Anyway,
and he's going to run like a 4-3. He was saying on the NFL Network broadcast yesterday he's going to beat Xavier Worthy's time.
I don't know about that.
And look, if he does, I hate using this because I was pushing back on it last year, but the track record of those guys is not great.
No, it's not great.
Because if you get, what I worry about with a guy like that is beyond the size, you get so used to winning by pure speed. Everybody in the NFL is fast. And is his game, we did this with Isaiah Bond, who I think people have come back down to earth on, but like he's fast because you can't run by guys in the NFL the same way you can in college. You have to, it's good to be fast, but you have to have another tool, or preferably multiple other tools to win beyond your speed. So, I get, for the sake of the exercise, Tez Johnson is fast, and
fast.
And
no, Tez Johnson, he can separate at the top of the route.
Okay,
Like
all right.
He's a better separator than I thought he would be, and that's why if he was just running past people in a straight line the whole week, I would have been like, all right, whatever.
No, you would have been.
But there was some more nuance to it, in my opinion, than I expected. Because I promise you, when I was trying not.
I'll give you that. No, he has been. He's a little more shifty. I'll give you that. I think it's like if they are going to take that guy, if we're being honest, I might. The size still worries me. He's probably more technically impressive than Isaiah Bond if we're talking about those kinds of guys.
So I think Isaiah Bond's bigger.
Right. Like, that's where I kind of hesitate.
Just looking it up, like Worthy is 5'11", 165. So the biggest thing with Tez Johnson is that he's 5'9", right? Like if he was, that 2 inches matters for, like, the catch radius thing is important. Like that 2 inches matter.
Yeah.
Xavier Worthy is not going to win a ton at the catch point, but we saw at the AFC Championship game that he can. I know not everybody agrees that it was a catch, but like he went up and made the catch.
He was able to make a play on the football. He also is like, and he has really long arms. His what is it, wingspan? That's got to be the equivalent of somebody who's like 6'1", 6'2". Whereas Tez Johnson is, I think, built more proportionally.
Yeah, so, Worthy is 5'11", 165 with 31-inch arms, 31 and 1/8-inch arms. And Tez Johnson's 5'9", 156 with 29 and 7/8, almost 30-inch arms. So we're talking about like
that's a notable difference,
in an inch or so. Really, to me, the body type comp is Tank Dell. And I get that Tank Dell, if you want to make the argument for it, it's that Tank Dell's been great when healthy in the NFL. If you want to make the argument against it, is that Tank Dell can't stay healthy.
That's why I go to Devin Tompkins, who was, and he was 22. I was a big fan of Devin Tompkins coming out of Utah State. He averaged like 25 yards a catch his last year in college because he was so fast, and he was like detailed, his release specifically, but in the route he was good, and he just pull away from everybody. But he's 5'9", 160 pounds. He ends up going undrafted, and he was in Tampa for a couple years. Now he's in Carolina, and they use him as a kick returner, and he's used kind of sparingly as a gadget player. And if that's what Tez Johnson is, if that's ultimately what he is, like, I could be into that. I'm not taking that guy in the top 100, which I think is what they're going to have to do to get Tez Johnson. I guess I need to go figure out who day 3 Tez Johnson is. I don't know off the top of my head. We'll find out.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm not totally out on Tez. I shouldn't say we're doing Taekwondo again with Tez Johnson. I do think there are differences there. I just don't think that player, how that player usually translates in the NFL, is worth where Tez Johnson's going to go. I think just like what happened in Taekwondo and what happens with other players, I think teams are going to get caught up in the 40 and the fact that he was at Oregon, big school, made a run, all of that, and probably end up overdrafting him. And then he ends up being, you texted me like Tutu Atwell as a comp, which Tutu Atwell's not a bad player. I don't think you need to take Tutu Atwell in the top 100, especially when you already have Pop Douglas on your roster.
It's too much. That is truly too much like Pop Douglas, right? I think those two guys are Tutu Atwell and Pop Douglas are really similar. The thing with Johnson, I know we're doing a lot on Johnson, but if he runs well, like Tank Dell is basically the same size, 5'8", 165.
Didn't Tank Dell like have a bad 40? Why do I remember that?
So Tank Dell ran a 4.49. Yeah. Which is at that size was considered, like that was considered a flag. Now, I understand the 40 is not everything. It certainly is nowadays. It's becoming less and less important. But when you look at Tez Johnson, to your point, if he has the Senior Bowl week that he had, he measures similarly to Worthy and similarly to Tank Dell, and then he also puts down like a 4.3. Yeah, then you're probably right. Then we're probably talking about at worst a second round pick. So
and I just don't think that's where they should be taking that guy. Not with all the holes that they have. So
can we talk about another potential wide receiver for the Patriots?
Is it? Hang on. Is it a Senior Bowl guy or no?
No.
All right. So let me just put a wrap on this real quick because you reminded me of the point I wanted to make. As you consider all this and consider it, if you've hung around, I appreciate everybody who hung around for an hour 40 minutes or an hour 35 because I was late. Consider this a disclaimer on basically everything we said. And this applies to the combine. This really applies to the next 4 months. And I think it's important to remember, like this, we're evaluating these guys as football players. We're evaluating them as 11 on 11, pads on, full contact, 60 minutes, right? these events are more about confirming priors and tiebreakers. I don't think you look at what a guy does in this event, and there's different variants for different players, right? A guy like Harold Fannin is going to have some more variance because he's coming from a smaller school. A guy like Nick Martin is going to have some variance because he only has one full season under his belt, and it was 2 years ago because he was hurt last year, right? So those guys can maybe move a little more. But you're not going to take a guy who's a projected, not even in the top 200 and suddenly say, okay, he's a top 50 pick because he had a great Senior Bowl. Right. You're not going to take a guy who's a projected top 40 pick and say, I wouldn't take him till day 3 because he had a couple bad reps at the Senior Bowl. At the end of the day, you need to look at what the guys did during the year to figure out what kind of prospects they are. What this is more about, like we talked about off the top. All right, Ariante Ursary and Josh Connerly, similar players. Who, sort that thing out, right? Xavier Restrepo, Tez Johnson, expected to go in the same area. Sort that thing out. We're not, and I know we just kind of talked about Tez Johnson moving up draft boards. We're talking about maybe 15, 20 spots, which is pretty extreme. But That's the guy who's having the best Senior Bowl week, and we think could have the best. If he runs sub 4.3, people are going to call it the best combine. So, and that's worth 15 or 20 spots max. We're talking about, it's more how do you set the board? You're going to take all these guys in the same range. You have them all ranked similarly. It's that ranking within the range is what this week is for, what the combine is for, what things are like that is for. So I kind of wanted, I meant to say that off the top. Maybe I did and I forgot. It's a long show, but I just kind of wanted to put that caveat on all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really true. And I think that, the tackle one was a big one that I think a lot of teams and scouts were trying to divvy up is, where are Connerly, Ursary, where are those guys?
I don't want to hear Connerly got bull rush. You can't draft him in the top 100 anymore.
Yeah.
It was one rep, which to your point was probably not as convincing of a win as it looks on film, or I should say as it looks like in the immediate, but it matters.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would be worried about Josh Connerly at right tackle. You're not drafting him at right tackle, so.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that was a big conversation, was those fringe first round tackles, Ursary, Connerly, where was Zabel going to play, all those types of things. How did those guys look this week, and how do we then go ahead and stack them, and how do we feel about all of them, looking at them at the same time against similar competition? It's especially nice that Connerly and Ursary are playing the same guys, right? Because
they're literally back to back.
Yeah, which I don't think is a coincidence. I think that Jim Nagy was asked to probably do that by teams to put those guys together. So it's a good barometer to try to separate those guys now moving forward. But along with the tackles, kind of that being sort of the conversation, it was really fun this week, these last couple of days, to talk about Travis Hunter with these people. And I know you love this conversation.
Is this the receiver you wanted to talk about? The receiver you wanted to talk about?
So the majority of people, I would definitely say, feel like he's a corner.
Yeah.
But there definitely are people that think that he's a better receiver, and at least could be more valuable for your team at receiver.
Okay.
If I put it to you that way, right? It's a great conversation. Would you rather have an A+ corner or a minus receiver? And how does that needle move in terms of positional value and all that good stuff, right? Is a fun conversation. I think it's worth having, because I think that there's one thing that's very true, and that is there is no question about the talent, right? Everybody is enamored with Travis Hunter, and everybody's enamored with Abdul Carter. Those two guys are at the very, very top of this draft. It's those two guys, where are the quarterbacks going to go, and then everybody else. And that's right now is how this draft is looking.
Look, I'm still where I was with Travis Hunter. You want to play him at corner? I think it'll work. You want to play him at receiver? I think it can work. But you got to know. And that needs to be discussed. They can meet with him. I guess they can't meet with him now. They can meet with him at the combine. They can meet with them at, when they have their meeting here, however many meetings they can have with him, out of as many as possible. If you think you're going to take them, and it's not all right, we drafted Travis Hunter. What are we going to do? It's the coaching staff, the front office, everybody needs to be on the same page for what he is doing, and you need to make sure that he is good being on that page. You can't draft him, plan to play him at wide receiver, and then have him stewing because he wants to play corner. And I don't think it's realistic for him to play both ways full time. I'm still sticking to that. Can you maybe use him as like, all right, he's going to play receiver full time, and then, all right, 2-minute drill, we're going to throw him in as an extra corner because we could use him there. Like, yeah, you can, like, that is fine. You can't play 100 snaps a game in the NFL. You just can't do it. So I'm not against them drafting Travis Hunter. The process to prepare to draft him is different than the average player because he's not average. He's not normal, right? We're talking about a different kind of animal, and he's a tremendously talented football player. You need to know the best ways of the team to harness that talent, and I don't think it can be something you decide on the fly. I think it needs to be something you need to go in with a plan, and maybe that plan changes as you go and you get new information, but I don't think that plan can be, all right, well, we got him in here. We'll wing it. We'll just see what feels right. No, I think you got to know coming in, this is what he's going to do, and you got to make sure that he's on board with that, because if not, now you have a guy you used the top 5 pick on that's instantly unhappy, and that's really not good, especially for a new coaching staff.
Okay, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think that the main thing, though, is that you need to make sure that Travis Hunter is in the right headspace with what he's going to do at the NFL level, right? Like
I said that.
He needs to understand, right? Like to me, this comes down to when you get into the interviews and you get into the 30 visit and the private visits on campus and all that good stuff that's going to come.
Yeah,
combine and on, pro days and things like that. Like, what's his mindset? Like, if he thinks that he's going to come in and be a unicorn and be like the Shohei Ohtani of football and play both ways and do all this stuff,
right?
Like he's probably naive. Like he's kind of dreaming.
So I guess here's my point, because I agree. Like I'm not saying you have to let him dictate it, and I'm not saying you 100% dictate it to him. I don't think that would work. But it doesn't have to be his favorite thing. But you go and you meet with him, you lay it out. This is our plan for you, right? And if he says, that's exactly what I want to do, awesome. If he says, yep, I can see that working for me, great. If he goes, nope, I'm not going to do that. Like, let's say he says, I want to play full time. Don't draft me if you don't plan on playing me both ways full time. It becomes a tough question, right? Do you draft him and try to fit the square peg in a round hole and say, nope, we're just going to play you at receiver and you're going to have to deal with it? Or at that point, do you move on? And like, if his plan, if what he wants to do is something you don't believe will be successful, do you still draft him? Because at that point, I'm kind of looking at it and saying, especially the recent history this organization has had in the draft, I kind of look at it and say, and I'm not saying this will happen. I don't know this will happen, but it's a scenario you have to be prepared for. I kind of look at it and say, if we can't get to a point with him where we can make it work, I'm using the pick elsewhere. I'm looking elsewhere. Because there's no point in picking him if you can't develop him.
Yeah, here's the reason why I mainly bring it up, because the way that I see the board shaking out right now is the reality is that like the blue chip players in this draft are those two guys. It's Carter and it's Hunter. Do you even think
he's going to be on the board?
Right?
Because I don't.
So I don't know, but if he's on the board at 4, and we're assuming that Carter is not on the board, you are not taking the best player available if you don't take Travis Hunter. Like, that's just, if you take Mason Graham in that spot and even Will Campbell in that spot, which would obviously make a lot more sense, just from a positional needs type of thing, you're not taking the best player available. And I think a lot of people, myself included, are all about, let's just stack talent onto this roster. They have so many holes. They need talent. They need top-end talent. And I get it. They need to have a plan. They need to have a plan that everybody's on the same page. Right. This is how we're going to use you. I just think that, just being here, I just think that there are people that think that he can be a great wide receiver. That makes me think, okay, like in the league, there are people that think that he can be a great wide receiver. That was my take from him watching his tape originally. So I'm just not crazy, right? Like I'm not completely out of left field with that take. That's all.
And if he wants to play receiver, great. If he says, I don't want to play receiver, it doesn't, now those people have to ask themselves a tough question.
So just to play it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to play it out, because we have a few more minutes and we can do this.
There's a call on the line I want to take too, but we'll do this.
Okay. Tennessee.
Yep.
I think Tennessee is going to take Abdul Carter.
I think so too.
I think Tennessee is going to take Abdul Carter.
They're going to give Will Levis one more shot for some reason.
Or they're going to sign a bridgy quarterback.
Yeah.
They'll end up with Sam Darnold or something like that.
We'll get to Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold factors in elsewhere in this equation, but
they have an offensive-minded coach in Brian Callahan. They just changed GMs again. They're going to understand that this is a little bit more of a slow burn. They have Everett Boy Bergonzi is there at GM, and they hired Dave Ziegler, old Patriot executive, as their assistant general manager. I think those guys are in it for the long haul. I think they're going to play the slow play there with Tennessee and just take who they think is the best player in the draft, and Abdul Carter. With Cleveland in the Giants, I don't think Shedeur Sanders is going to Cleveland. I just don't think he's going to go on to play there. I don't think he wants anything to do with the Browns. I think the Giants, though, that makes a lot of sense. We saw them kind of, rubbing elbows at the Shrine Bowl.
All right, well, but you said Shedeur Sanders. Would Travis Hunter go to Cleveland?
I don't know. I don't think Shedeur Sanders wants to go to Cleveland. That's just my opinion. Just my take on it. I just don't think he wants to go to Cleveland. Are they going to draft Cam Ward with the Browns? Because the Browns could also be in a position where they just say, there's no quarterback in this draft that we love.
Right.
We're not going to reach, so we're just going to go Carter, Hunter, 1-2, and then this whole thing is moot. So the Browns conversation is really where it is to me, because I think the Giants are going to take Shedeur. I think that's happening.
I think the Giants are going to take a veteran quarterback. I think they're more that Sam Darnold team, because it's so clearly.
Didn't they just do that with Daniel Jones?
No, because they kept Daniel Jones, and Daniel Jones was inherited by Brian Daboll. And
but in terms of talent level, I know Darnold's had a much better year than Daniel Jones has ever had in the league. But when you're just talking about pure talent, in evaluating the two players, I kind of see it as the same thing.
I guess, but it's also proven versus unproven, and I think that for both Brian Daboll and for Joe Shane, it doesn't feel like they need to make the playoffs to save their jobs. And you're trying to capture lightning in a bottle. You're trying to get what the Commanders got with Jaden Daniels. For every Jaden Daniels, there's how many? Even as good as Drake May was, right? Look at where the Patriots ended up. So I think the Giants are a veteran quarterback team, and I think that team makes all the sense in the world for Travis Hunter if they have a quarterback in place, because it's New York. It's a big market. You can sell him. Him with Malik Neighbors is really attractive. He's playing offense. If not, they need a corner. They're in that division that has a ton of good receivers. I think Travis Hunter makes a ton of sense for the Giants. I almost think he makes enough sense to the point where they would go out and get a veteran quarterback in order to facilitate it. The other thing that happens is we know the Raiders like Shedeur Sanders, and we've talked about the Raiders moving from 6 to 4. What about the Raiders going from 6 to 2? And maybe the Browns just say, right, if they are that team that says, we want a quarterback next year, and maybe Travis Hunter won't go there. If you think the Sanders family has some issue with Cleveland, and that's kind of been rumored that Dion may limit where these guys can go, maybe the Raiders move up and say, fine, we'll take Shedeur, and the Browns look at it and they get the ammunition to move up and take the quarterback next year. So maybe the Giants don't even get a chance at Shedeur Sanders.
Either way, I think we're both in agreement that there's a real chance that Shedeur goes before the Patriots pick, which is the best case scenario for the Patriots.
It is.
They need the quarterbacks to go.
But
they need the quarterbacks.
They either need both to go or none to go. I actually think one going is the worst case scenario, because if both go, well, now you get automatically Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, right? You get one of those two.
Right.
If neither go, now for those quarterback teams that are a little further down, the Raiders, the Saints, now you're selling the object of choice. And you'd say, well, if those guys like the quarterback, wouldn't they move up higher? Well, now it's a little more affordable. Now it becomes more realistic. And now that 4th overall pick has more value. If one guy goes, right, now the Raiders at 6, they know you're not taking a quarterback. They know the Jaguars aren't taking a quarterback. And the Saints know they can call your bluff and say, Well, Jaguars aren't going to take quarterback. We'll trade with them, and it's going to be a cheaper pick, right? They're going to force you into that. So, to me, the worst-case scenario for the Patriots is one of the quarterbacks goes. I think you need both to go in the top 3 or neither to go in the top 3 to maximize the value. I think both going probably is the best outcome, but I actually think it's better if neither go than just one goes. Because if it's quarterback, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, now that pick has the least amount of value on the trade market and both blue-chip guys are gone. And I wouldn't rule out Carter and Hunter going in the top 3. I still think that's realistic.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think we've almost flip-flopped on this because I am saying that these quarterbacks stake. And I'm not saying that necessarily I think that it's a lock that 1 or 2 of them go, but I come back to 4, right? Yeah. And I just look at it and I say, whether it's Carter or Hunter, whichever one it is, right? You, as the Patriots, in the position that they're in terms of this roster right now, needing just all kinds of talent. They just need top of the roster talent. I just think it's really tough pill to swallow. You're going to let Abdul Carter get to 5 in this draft? You know what I mean? I don't see how, if you're Elliott Wolf and Cowden and Mike Vrabel and you're on the clock and one of those 2 guys is sitting there and you don't draft that player, even if you have concerns about Hunter in terms of role and which side of the ball he's playing on. I don't know. I don't know how you just don't draft that guy. Now, we might not be in this situation. Right?
Wait, hang on, because you said we flip-flopped on this. Just to backtrack, wasn't your original case that Hunter was going to be on the board at 4?
No, my original case was that I think the league is going to be smart enough about these quarterbacks. That's my original case.
If that happens, the Patriots aren't going to have Carter or Hunter. Correct. Because if neither quarterbacks go in the top 3.
No, yeah.
Right, who else is going? Maybe McMillan mixes in. Maybe if the Browns are fascinated, but right, exactly. So
I think the only other guys that could factor into any of this conversation right now, and it's January 29th. There's a long freaking way to go. But the only guys that can I truly factor in right now to me are Campbell, if he measures out as a tackle, and Mason Graham. I think those 2 guys are the next closest thing to what we're talking about.
If Campbell's arms check out,
Daniel Jeremiah, in his top 50 that he just released,
he thinks Campbell's a tackle.
Right, but I'm just saying, looking at the rankings, it's crystal clear that right now the consensus is Hunter and Carter are the 2 best players in the draft.
Sure,
and then there's a drop off.
If Campbell's arms check out, would you call him a blue chip player?
Yeah, I probably would. Okay. I think everybody feels confident about him sticking in the league.
That's what we're talking about here.
Time.
We're talking about
the difference. Might be a guard.
We're talking about the difference between a blue chip player and a really good player. So, if Campbell's a blue chip, you take a blue chip player at 4 if he's there. This is if his arms check out, right? So, and I guess here's my one other point to something you said, and then I do want to get to your call, Ed, and I know we're up against, so we're going to do this kind of quick. You mentioned with where their roster is, they can't pass on a blue chip player. I would almost make the opposite case, especially if it's Hunter and you're not on the same page with him about what his role is going to be. They don't need one good player. They need multiple good players. And if you can move down and get a future first or get an extra top 50 pick or get a second round pick, something like that, you get what I'm saying? And it's a combination of those. Now you've turned the ability to get one great player. Maybe you're going from blue chip to whatever the step below blue chip is. I think it's green chip, right? Maybe you're going from blue chip to green chip, but now you're getting 3 or 4 green chip players who are still cornerstone, foundational players. I actually see more value in that because they need more than one guy. It's not you're plugging one guy in and fixing it. So I think the potential to trade down is still very attractive. Real quick, Ed in Western Mass has been hanging on. I want to make sure I get you in here, Ed. What's going on?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, great. Thanks for taking the call. First, I just want to remind you, Evan, when you first watched Will Campbell's tape, you said he was a blue chip. So if the arms measure out, you said he was a blue chip from the start. The question I have is about Travis Hunter. I actually am all set on him. I know he's the best player in the draft, but I'm curious where you would rank him positionally as a wide receiver in last year's draft. So Harrison, Neighbors, Adunze, does he slot in there? Or you put him above one of those guys? And then for corners in the draft that we got Gonzo, how does he slot in with Witherspoon and Gonzo? I'll take it off the air. Appreciate it.
What do you think?
Okay. So I guess I said Will Campbell's a blue chip, so I'm going to be consistent.
You did. I think you did. You did say it with the caveat of the arm length, which is you're allowed to hold out for that.
Player.
That's fine.
There's no debating Will Campbell in terms of him sticking in the NFL for the next decade on an offensive line. It's just a conversation of if he's going to be inside or out.
Well, I guess
he's either a blue chip guard or he's a blue chip tackle.
Well, to go back to your takes during the 2022 draft, which we don't need to rehash fully, but in your mind, can a guard be a blue chip player?
Yes, but it's much harder. Like you have to be Quentin Nelson. You have to be Zach Martin. You have to truly move the needle, move the equation. Like you have to.
Do you think he's that kind of guard? If he is a guard,
I don't know.
Well, you said he was a blue chip player.
But we're talking when we're talking about Zach Martin. We're talking about.
Do you think he has the potential? Do you think he has the potential
to
to be that kind of player? I'm not saying you have to say this is what he will be. Do you think he has the tools to be that kind of player?
Yes. Yeah. And I also what I also think needs to be mentioned with Will Campbell is the intangibles. Like I think he's got leadership, he's got effort, he's got finish, he's got traits, right? Like if that's what they're looking for, which is certainly what it sounds like based off of what, they told me this week and what they've been saying, like that, he checks all those boxes for them. And that's what makes him intriguing at the top. What was the other thing that
real quick? All right. So he asked about, I think in this class you had Travis Hunter 2nd to 10th as a receiver.
Nope. I think Travis Hunter is the best receiver and the best corner in the draft.
Okay. Last year's class. He asked last year's class for receiver. So it's Harrison, it's Neighbors, it's Adunze, and then Brian Thomas. I don't think you're going to have him below anybody beyond that. You're not going to have him below like Keon Coleman. So where do you rank him there as a receiver?
Well, it's funny because we were all too low on BTJ, right?
Yeah.
I mean, BTJ is fantastic. I would probably say that he's in the conversation with me with the Dunze for wide receiver 3. I don't know if he would be wide receiver 3. I mean, I would really have to think about it. But I think he's certainly in the conversation I think to me, Harrison and Neighbors are really special prospects.
He's not that level, but I think he's at Adunze or maybe a little above. He's probably closer to Adunze than the other two. Yeah. But I'd put him in there. And then the other one was 2022 draft corners. So that was
Witherspoon,
Christian Gonzalez. Witherspoon. I don't think Gonzalez is maybe as good of a cornerback prospect as I've seen. I don't know that he's quite there. Maybe a touch below. I'd put him ahead of Witherspoon. That's me.
Yeah, no, I think he's definitely in the conversation to be the top corner in any draft.
Okay.
Yeah, he's really good. He's a really good player. I don't know, because I think a lot of us, I know we have to wrap, but like a lot of us have sort of been all over the place on Travis Hunter, myself included, because he's such a unicorn, and it's a tough call. Like it's a tough one to kind of figure out which position is he going to play. All that kind of stuff is difficult to figure out. But I think at the end of the day, everybody's sort of coming to the realization that is just a really, really good football player. I'm not going to call him generational or anything like that, but like that's just a really, really good football player.
If we're ever going to call a player generational, it's him, because generational means a player you only see once in a generation, once every 20, 30, 40 years. No, Travis Hunter's the one player you call generational.
Sure. Yeah.
That might be the best word I could think to describe him. Although it's going to be more common now because you're going to have all these kids that saw him do it and want to do it. So. All right.
Oh, really quickly. Last thing, I promise.
Yeah.
Your boy, Josh Simmons, was walking around Mobile this week, interviewing with teams. How do you feel about that?
I think he's a good player. I missed the report back in December. He's a torn patellar tendon, right? That's what he had.
Yeah.
That's
bad injury.
That's the same injury Cole Strange had. Cole Strange is out 12 months. And I know he had some setbacks, but he was out 12 months. So Josh Simmons had his in late October. So even if we call it 10 months, He's just getting back to it in August. And for a team that desperately needs an immediate answer at tackle, he's not going to be that because of the injury. And for the team they are at this time, he doesn't make sense. There's other teams he might make a ton of sense for. If a team has an older tackle on a 1-year deal or, something like that, yeah, he makes more sense. He doesn't make if you're drafting him, he's probably not going to play at a high level until 2026. At that point, I'll just take a tackle next year that's fully healthy because either player, you're going to get him at the same time. So
yeah,
good for him. I'm glad he's talking to teams. I think he's a good player.
Yeah.
Like, don't get that twisted. I don't have anything against the kid. I just think for where the Patriots are at, a guy that's coming off the injury he's coming off of is a misuse of assets. They need guys that can make an impact like day one. And he's just, unfortunately, because he's hurt, he's not going to do that. So
it's not. I don't think you can really count on him his rookie season.
Right,
because
exactly.
by the time he gets healthy, he gets ramped up. Like we saw this with the guys from this year. Like it's obviously an in-season injury, but like Caden Wallace basically lost his entire rookie season, right?
So,
and it's impossible.
So to me, at that point, if you're going to use a top 50 pick on a tackle, because that's where he's going to go, if you're going to use a top 50 pick on a tackle, use a top 50 pick next year, because you'll get the guy at the same time either way. And now you've added this guy this year. So if he like falls to day 3, I could totally be convinced of it, because I think with those picks you have a little more runway. But that's just I feel bad. Like I don't want to come across as ripping on the kid or knocking him. Like
do you want another Josh Simmons connection here for you? Not only is he like a value pick, right?
Yeah.
Because he's going to be hurt.
With Vrabel, Ohio State.
Not only did he go to Ohio State, he's a Drew Rosenhaus client.
All right. Well, that's a bygone era, so we'll see if that still plays
out. It?
But I guess maybe not. Look, they're going to take him, and I'm going to look like an idiot. But I'm just saying, I like guys that can play day one. I think this team needs that.
Fair enough. All right, wrap us up because we're already over.
Yeah. We're even over the time I missed, so I apologize, Matt. We'll be back next week. We'll be back at noon next week. I saw some people confuse the time. It does move around a little bit this time of year because you have events like the Senior Bowl and the Combine and all that. But for the most part, off-season shows are going to be noon on Wednesdays. We will be back at that time next week. Evan will be back in the host chair. In the meantime, he'll have Senior Bowl recaps on Patriots.com. I'll have my Senior Bowl recap once the week is over on 98.5thesportshub.com. Next week, we will probably have the bulk of the coaching staff. They made some more hires. We didn't get into it this week, so we'll get into that more next week. Maybe we have some titles, things like that, and I'm sure more draft and free agency stuff as well. So until next week, for Evan Lazar, I'm Alex Barth. Thanks for tuning in. For Matt Behind Glass, thank you, and we will talk to you next week. Bye.
Thank you for downloading this podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Google Play, and everywhere else you listen. Like the show? Please rate and review us. Listener comments and ratings help keep us high in the podcast rankings so new listeners can find us. Be sure to check Patriots.com for more news and more podcasts.